The morning sun peeked through the blinds as Teresa Bennett stood in front of her closet, pushing aside her usual power suits and designer dresses. Today was different. After 15 years of building Horizon Hospitality, from a single boutique hotel to a respected chain with 23 locations across the country, Teresa had made a bold decision. She was going undercover at her flagship hotel in Miami. "This doesn't look like me at all," she murmured, examining herself in the mirror. Her normally highlighted blonde hair was now a mousy brown, pulled back in a simple ponytail. Contact lenses replaced her signature glasses, and she wore no makeup. The baggy uniform of a housekeeping trainee hung loosely on her slender frame. Her phone buzzed. It was David, her chief operating officer and closest confidant in the company. "Are you sure about this, T?" he asked when she answered. "The board meeting is in 3 weeks. This isn't exactly the best time to go radio silent." Teresa sighed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I need to see what's really happening, David. The customer satisfaction scores at the Miami location have dropped 12% in the last quarter. Something's wrong, and I'm not getting straight answers from management. And you think pretending to be a housekeeper named—" He paused, checking his notes. "Tess Baker is going to solve that?" "I started as a housekeeper when I was 19, Teresa replied, a touch of defensiveness in her voice. "Sometimes you need to go back to your roots to remember what matters. Besides, housekeeping interacts with every department. It's the perfect position to observe everything." David knew better than to argue further. Once Teresa set her mind to something, there was no changing it. That's how she had built a hospitality empire from nothing, after all. "Just be careful," he said finally, "and check in with me every evening. If you go missing, I need to know whether to call the police or just the executive board." Teresa laughed. "I'll be fine. It's just 5 days." After hanging up, she grabbed her small suitcase, nothing like the luxury luggage she typically traveled with, and headed out. Her driver Jorge did a double-take when he saw her. "Ms. Bennett, is that you?" "It is, and for the next week I'm just Tess," she said, sliding into the back seat. "And Jorge?" This conversation never happened. The drive to the hotel took 40 minutes. Teresa used the time to review her cover story once more. Tess Baker, 38, shaving a few years off her actual age, recently moved to Miami after a divorce. Previous experience as a housekeeper at small motels in North Carolina. She'd practiced speaking with a slight southern accent. Just enough to be noticeable, but not so much that she couldn't maintain it. As they approached the gleaming 20-story building with Horizon Miami emblazoned across the top in her company's signature blue, Teresa felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. She hadn't done actual housekeeping work in over 20 years. What if she couldn't keep up? 2 blocks from here is fine, Jorge, she instructed. "I'll walk the rest." The moment her feet hit the pavement, Teresa Bennett disappeared and Tess Baker took her place. She hunched her shoulders slightly, made her walk less confident, and clutched her suitcase with both hands. The hotel lobby was bustling with afternoon check-ins. Tourists in bright vacation clothes mingled with business travelers in crisp suits. Behind the front desk, 3 receptionists juggled phone calls and guest inquiries. Teresa had specifically chosen to arrive during peak check-in time. The staff would be too busy to pay much attention to a new housekeeping recruit. She approached the employee entrance at the side of the building, where a bored-looking security guard sat flipping through a magazine. "Excuse me," she said, letting her voice waver slightly. "I'm Tess Baker. Today's my first day. In housekeeping?" The guard barely glanced at her before pushing a clipboard across the desk. "Sign in. Show ID." Teresa presented the fake driver's license David had arranged through the company's security consultant. The guard looked at it for approximately 2 seconds before handing it back. "3rd floor. Human Resources. Take the service elevator." He pointed down a hallway, then returned to his magazine. Teresa's first mental note. Security protocols were lax. Very lax. She'd address that later. The service elevator was nothing like the gleaming ones in the main lobby. This one was scratched, dented, and smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals. As the doors closed, Teresa caught a glimpse of herself, in the mirrored wall, and barely recognized the woman staring back. Good. That was exactly the point. Human. Resources turned out to be a harried woman named Vanessa, who looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Another one?" she muttered when Teresa introduced herself. Fine. Let me find your paperwork." She rifled through a stack of folders, eventually pulling one out. Here, fill these out. I need them back before you leave today. No welcome. No orientation. Just forms thrust across a desk. When do I start training? Teresa asked. Vanessa laughed, but there was no humor in it. Training? You'll shadow Rita today. If you can keep up, you're hired. If not, she shrugged. We need bodies, but they have to work. Teresa nodded meekly while internally seething. This was absolutely not the Horizon Hospitality hiring process she had designed and implemented years ago. What had happened here? After completing the paperwork, Teresa was directed to the housekeeping break room on the 5th floor. The space was small, with mismatched furniture and a refrigerator that made concerning noises every few minutes. 6 women in the same uniform Teresa wore sat around a table, speaking rapidly in Spanish. They fell silent when she entered. I'm looking for Rita, Teresa said, hovering awkwardly in the doorway. A stocky woman with graying hair at her temples stood up. That's me. You the new girl? Yes, Tess Baker. Rita looked her up and down, clearly unimpressed. You ever done housekeeping before? Yes, ma'am. In North Carolina, small motels, nothing fancy like this. One of the other women snickered. Fancy, sure. Rita shot the woman a look before turning back to Teresa. We've got 16 rooms to do before 4 o'clock. I don't have time to hold your hand, so watch what I do and try to keep up. You mess up, I'll tell you. You mess up too much, I'll tell Vanessa to find someone else. I understand, Teresa said, trying to look appropriately intimidated while her mind raced. 16 rooms in less than 3 hours? The Horizon standard was a maximum of 12 rooms per 8-hour shift to ensure quality cleaning. Rita led her to a supply cart parked in the hallway. This is yours now. Check it every morning. If something's missing, you find replacements before you start your shift. We don't come back for supplies in the middle of cleaning. The cart was well worn, with one wheel that made a persistent squeak. Teresa noted that several items on the standard inventory checklist were missing. Where are the disinfectant wipes? She asked. And the air freshener? Rita shrugged. Budget cuts. We use the all-purpose spray for everything now. Come on. We're starting on the 10th floor. As they rode up in the service elevator, Teresa discreetly studied the older woman. Rita moved with efficiency, but there was a weariness to her that went beyond physical fatigue. How long had she been working here? What had changed during her time? The 10th floor was quieter than the lobby had been. Most guests were out enjoying the Miami sunshine or attending business meetings. Rita stopped at room 1012 and knocked sharply. Housekeeping, she called. After waiting a few seconds, she used her keycard to open the door. The room was a disaster. Towels strewn across the bathroom floor, bed linens tangled and half on the floor, empty food containers on every surface, and clothes scattered everywhere. Party animals, Rita muttered. You take the bathroom, I'll start on the rest. 20 minutes per room max. That's all we can afford if we want to finish on time. 20 minutes? The Horizon standard was 45 minutes for a standard room, 60 for a suite. This was impossible. But Teresa got to work, trying to maintain her cover while also noting everything that didn't meet company standards. The bathroom was especially concerning. The all-purpose cleaner Rita mentioned wasn't rated for sanitizing bathroom surfaces. This wasn't just a service issue. It was a health concern. By the 3rd room, Teresa's back was aching and her hands were raw from the harsh chemicals. Rita worked like a machine, never slowing, barely speaking except to correct Teresa's technique. No, she said, watching Teresa remake a bed. Corners like this. She demonstrated a shortcut that saved time but left the sheets looser than Horizon standards required. During their 6th room, Rita received a call on her walkie-talkie. Housekeeping, we need immediate service in 1432. Guest complaint about bathroom cleanliness. Rita cursed under her breath. You, she pointed at Teresa, finish this room. I'll handle 1432 and meet you at 1016. Alone for the first time, Teresa worked quickly but properly, following the standards she herself had written years ago. She was slower than Rita, but the room was actually clean when she finished. As she pushed her cart to the next room, a young man in an expensive suit exited the room across the hall. He was on his phone, gesturing emphatically as he spoke. Absolutely unacceptable, he was saying. I'm paying $500 a night for this place, and the service is worse than a roadside motel. He barely glanced at Teresa as he passed, but his next words made her freeze. The horizon used to be top tier. Now it's a joke. Someone needs to tell that CEO, what's her name, Bennett, that her empire is crumbling. Teresa stood motionless, the man's words echoing in her ears. This was exactly why she needed to be here. Something had gone terribly wrong with her flagship hotel, and it was time to find out exactly what, or who, was to blame. As the day wore on, Teresa's suspicions grew. This wasn't just about budget cuts or poor management. There was a systematic dismantling of the standards and practices she'd built her company on. And tomorrow she would dig deeper to uncover who was responsible. Teresa awoke before her alarm, her body stiff from the previous day's work. The small studio apartment she'd rented for the week was nothing like her waterfront penthouse. Plain white walls, a lumpy mattress, and the constant hum of the ancient air conditioner, all part of maintaining her cover as Tess Baker. She winced as she sat up. Muscles she'd forgotten existed screamed in protest. After 15 years of business meetings and charity galas, her body wasn't used to the physical demands of housekeeping anymore. Day 2, she muttered, reaching for her phone. She had 3 missed calls from David and a text that simply read, "Updates?" She typed quickly, standards completely ignored. Staff overworked. Someone's cutting corners everywhere. More tonight. Her shift started at 7 a.m. Rita had informed her yesterday that morning shift was even more demanding than afternoon. All checkout. Rooms had to be cleaned and prepared for new guests by 3 p.m. The employee entrance was busier this morning. Teresa joined a group of housekeepers waiting for the service elevator, most looking as tired as she felt. None spoke to her directly, but she caught snippets of conversation. Third, time this month the paychecks were, Jose Mira and my cousin at the beachside resort, makes $2 more an hour. He's coming today to check on the numbers. Again, Teresa's ears perked up at the last comment. Who was coming? Before she could listen more, Rita appeared beside her. You're back, she said, sounding mildly surprised. Most new people quit after the first day. I need the job, Teresa replied simply. Rita nodded. You're with me again today, but first morning meeting. The housekeeping staff gathered in the same break room as yesterday, about 20 women of various ages, all wearing the same uniform, squeezed into the small space. A man in a sharp suit stood at the front checking his watch impatiently. Teresa recognized him immediately. Greg Phillips, the hotel manager she'd appointed 2 years ago. He looked different from the last time she'd seen him. His suit was more expensive, his watch definitely not something he could afford on a hotel manager's salary. But the biggest change was in his demeanor. Gone was the eager-to-please attitude that had gotten him promoted. In its place was something harder, colder. Ladies, he began, not bothering to wait for everyone to settle. We have 3 tour groups checking in today. That means we need every room perfect by 2 p.m., not 3. No exceptions. A collective groan went through the room. Additionally, he continued, raising his voice, Mr. Reynolds will be visiting today. As you know, he expects everything to be running efficiently. I don't want to see any of you standing around or taking unauthorized breaks. Teresa frowned. Reynolds? Lawrence Reynolds was the regional operations director, but he reported directly to her. Why was he making unscheduled visits to the Miami location without her knowledge? One more thing, Phillips added, his gaze sweeping the room. We've had complaints about items missing from guest rooms. If this continues, we'll be implementing bag checks at the end of every shift. The room erupted in protests. We're not thieves. That's humiliating. We don't touch guests' things. Phillips held up his hand. That's enough. This isn't a discussion. Get to work. As the meeting broke up, Teresa noticed the defeated expressions around her. These women weren't just tired. They were demoralized. Is he always like that? She asked Rita as they collected their carts. Rita snorted. That was him being nice. Wait until he doesn't have an audience. They started on the 12th floor today. The first room they entered had clearly hosted a bachelor party the night before. Empty bottles everywhere, pizza boxes stacked on the desk, and something that made Rita quickly shut the bathroom door. You don't want to see that, she warned. I'll handle the bathroom. You start on the rest. Teresa nodded gratefully. As she gathered empty bottles, she noticed a company credit card receipt left on the nightstand. Out of habit, she glanced at it and nearly dropped the bottle she was holding. The receipt showed charges from the hotel bar, $200 for drinks, $300 for premium service, and a $500 tip, all signed off by Greg Phillips, using a Horizon corporate account that was supposed to be reserved for hosting potential investors. Teresa quickly pocketed the receipt before Rita could see it. One mystery solved: Phillips was embezzling company funds. But that didn't explain the systematic dismantling of service standards or why Reynolds would be involved. By midday, Teresa's suspicions had grown. The supply shortages Rita had mentioned weren't just affecting housekeeping. A maintenance worker she spoke to while fixing a leaking shower complained about using cheap replacement parts that broke within weeks. A room service attendant delivering to a nearby room mentioned they'd switched to lower-quality food vendors 3 months ago during their lunch break, a hasty 15 minutes. Instead of the mandated 30, Teresa tried to learn more. "How long have things been like this?" she asked, keeping her tone casual. "The shortcuts, the supply issues?" The break room fell silent. The women exchanged glances. Finally, an older housekeeper spoke up. "It started about 8 months ago, right after Mr. Reynolds began his special visits." "Special visits? He comes with his fancy friends," another woman added. "They stay for free, drink the expensive stuff, and have private meetings with Phillips." Teresa's mind raced. Reynolds bringing fancy friends for private meetings? This was sounding less like mismanagement and more like something deliberately underhanded. Before she could ask more questions, the break room door swung open. Greg Phillips stood there, and beside him was Lawrence Reynolds. "Ladies," Phillips said smoothly, "Mr. Reynolds wanted to personally thank you for your hard work." Reynolds, a tall man with silver hair and a perpetual tan, smiled without warmth. "Indeed, the Miami location has shown remarkable profit growth this quarter, and that wouldn't be possible without your sacrifices." Teresa kept her head down, her heart pounding. She'd worked with Reynolds for 5 years, and he'd never once visited the housekeeping staff. Something was very wrong here. As the men turned to leave, Phillips added, "Rita, I need you to prepare the presidential suite immediately. Mr. Reynolds has guests arriving at 3. "But we still have 12 rooms to—" Rita began. "I don't care." "Make it work," Phillips cut her off. "And send your new girl." "What's her name?" "Tess," Rita replied. Phillips looked directly at Teresa for the first time. She held her breath, praying he wouldn't recognize her beneath the mousy hair and plain appearance. "Fine. Both of you, presidential suite, now." After they left, Rita cursed under her breath. "This means we'll be here until midnight finishing the regular rooms." "Does this happen often?" Teresa asked. "Every time Reynolds visits?" "Always the same. Last-minute preparations for mystery guests who leave the rooms destroyed. And we never get overtime pay for the extra hours." The presidential suite was on the top floor, requiring a special keycard to access. As the elevator ascended, Teresa's mind worked frantically. Who were these guests Reynolds kept bringing? And why was he having unauthorized meetings in her hotel? The suite was Teresa's pride and joy. She had personally overseen its design during the hotel's last renovation. But as they entered, her heart sank. The luxurious space was a shadow of what it should be. The fresh flowers she'd mandated for daily replacement were plastic now. The premium toiletries had been substituted with generic brands. Even the linens felt rougher, cheaper. "We need to set up for 5 people, Rita explained, checking a note Phillips had given her. "Business meeting first, then dinner." As they worked, Teresa noticed a folder left on the desk from Reynolds' previous visit. While Rita was busy in the bathroom, she quickly flipped it open. Inside were documents bearing the Horizon Hospitality letterhead, financial reports, property valuations, and most alarmingly, a draft agreement with Brightstar Hotels, Horizon's biggest competitor. The heading read, "Proposed Asset Transfer Agreement." Teresa felt sick. Reynolds and Phillips weren't just cutting corners to skim profits. They were deliberately devaluing the Miami hotel to justify selling it to Brightstar. And based on the numbers she saw, for far less than it was worth. A corporate takeover from within. And she'd been completely in the dark. The suite phone rang, startling her. Rita answered it, then turned to Teresa with a grim expression. "Phillips wants you downstairs. Now. Apparently, a guest is complaining about something missing from their room, and since you're the new girl..." Teresa's stomach dropped. Was this a coincidence, or had Phillips somehow realized who she was? "You'll be okay," Rita said, mistaking her expression for fear. Just remember you did nothing wrong. As Teresa rode the elevator down, she knew her cover was at risk. But now that she'd discovered what Reynolds and Phillips were up to, perhaps it was time for Tess Baker to disappear, and for Teresa Bennett to make a very unexpected appearance at tonight's secret meeting. Teresa's heart pounded as the elevator descended. Her mind raced through possibilities. Had Phillips recognized her? Had someone found the receipt she pocketed? Or was this really just about a missing item? The doors opened to reveal Phillips waiting with his arms crossed and a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Baker, isn't it? Come with me." He led her to a small office behind the reception desk. Inside, a red-faced man in an expensive golf outfit was gesturing angrily at a hotel security guard. "That's her," the man shouted when Teresa entered. "She was cleaning my room this morning." Phillips turned to Teresa with an expression of exaggerated concern. "Mr. Donovan here says his Rolex watch has gone missing. He believes it was on the nightstand when housekeeping entered his room." Teresa felt a flash of anger but kept her face neutral. "Sir, I never saw a watch. Rita and I cleaned your room together and we didn't touch any personal items." "Then where is it?" the man demanded. "It was a $50,000 watch. Perhaps you left it in the hotel safe," Teresa suggested quietly. "Or at the golf course." The man's face reddened further. "Are you calling me a liar?" Philip stepped in smoothly. "No one's calling anyone a liar, Mr. Donovan. Miss Baker is new and clearly doesn't understand our hotel's commitment to guest satisfaction." He turned to Teresa. "We always believe our guests, don't we?" The implication was clear. Admit to something she didn't do or lose her job. Before Teresa could respond, the security guard's radio crackled. He answered it, listened, then cleared his throat. "Sir, the watch has been found. It was turned in by a caddy at the golf club." The guest's angry expression melted into embarrassment. "Oh, well, I must have." "Good then." Without an apology, he left the room. Philip's smile vanished the moment the door closed. "You got lucky," he said coldly. "Very lucky. But understand something, at this hotel the guest is always right even when they're wrong. If this happens again, you won't have a job no matter what the truth is. Clear?" "Crystal clear," Teresa replied, struggling to keep the anger from her voice. Phillips checked his watch. "Get back to work. And tell Rita I want the presidential suite spotless by 3. Reynolds' guests are very particular." As Teresa headed back to the elevator, she noticed a young woman at the front desk watching her. The woman quickly looked away when their eyes met, but not before Teresa recognized her as Vanessa's assistant from Human Resources. Back upstairs, Rita was finishing the bedroom in the presidential suite. "What happened?" she asked when Teresa entered. "Guest claimed I stole his watch. It turned up at the golf course." Rita shook her head. "Tale as old as time. They lose something, blame housekeeping, find it, never apologize. Does that happen often?" "At least once a month. Usually Philip sides with the guests. Makes us pay for missing items out of our wages, even without proof." "You got lucky." Teresa felt a surge of outrage. This violated every employment law in the book, not to mention her own company policies. As they worked, Teresa's phone buzzed with a text from David. "Board meeting moved up. Tomorrow, not next week. Reynolds pushing for emergency vote on asset restructuring. What's happening?" The pieces were falling into place. Reynolds and Phillips were accelerating their plan. Tomorrow they would try to push through the sale of her hotel to Brightstar, likely with kickbacks for themselves. Before she could discover what was happening, she needed more evidence. And she needed to stop that meeting. "I need to use the restroom," she told Rita. "Be right back." Instead of heading to the bathroom, Teresa slipped into a service stairwell and called David. "Listen carefully," she whispered. "Reynolds and Phillips are trying to sell the Miami hotel to Brightstar. I need you to delay that board meeting by any means necessary. Tell them I'm flying in tomorrow." "Where are you now?" David asked. "Still undercover at the hotel. I need one more day to gather enough evidence to stop this and fire everyone involved. Be careful. T. If they're willing to sell off company assets behind your back, who knows what else they might do." After hanging up, Teresa hurried back to the presidential suite. Rita gave her a curious look but said nothing about her extended absence. At 2:30, Phillips arrived to inspect their work. "Not good enough," he declared, running a finger along a perfectly clean shelf. "The flowers need to be rearranged. The temperature needs to be exactly 68 degrees. And where are the special amenities I requested?" "What special amenities?" Rita asked. We weren't told about any special requests. Philip's smile was cold. That's not my problem, is it? Fix it, or find new jobs tomorrow. After he left, Rita slumped onto the couch looking defeated. I can't lose this job. My daughter's starting college next month. Teresa sat beside her. How long have you worked here, Rita?
12 years?
Since before it was even a Horizon property, she sighed. It used to be a good place to work. The owner before, some investment group, they were fair. Then Horizon bought it and things were even better for a while. Good benefits, fair pay, reasonable workload. What changed? New management. First Phillips, then that Reynolds guy started showing up. 8 months ago, everything changed overnight. Budget cuts, workload doubled, benefits slashed. People who complained disappeared, fired, or transferred. Teresa felt sick. 8 months ago, she'd been dealing with her mother's illness, taking extended time away from the company. Reynolds had used her absence to start dismantling everything she'd built. We need to get those special amenities, Teresa said, standing up. Where would they be? Probably in Phillips's office. But we can't go in there. You can't, but I can. Teresa's mind was made up. Her cover was less important now than gathering evidence and stopping tomorrow's meeting. Are you crazy? You'll get fired for sure. Trust me, Rita, I know what I'm doing. Teresa headed downstairs, no longer hunching her shoulders or making herself small. With each step, she felt more like herself again. Teresa Bennett, CEO, not Tess Baker, housekeeper. Phillips's office was empty when she arrived, but locked. As she was considering her options, a voice behind her made her jump, looking for something. It was the young woman from HR who'd been watching her earlier. I need to get into Mr. Phillips's office, Teresa said, deciding honesty was her best option. It's important. The woman studied her face. You're not really a housekeeper, are you? I've been watching you. You ask too many questions. Teresa tensed, ready to deny everything when the woman surprised her. Are you from corporate? Here to investigate Phillips and Reynolds? Because if you are, I want to help. Why would you help me? Teresa asked cautiously. My name's Zoe. I've worked here for 3 years. I have documentation of every policy violation, every labor law they've broken, every corner they've cut. I've been collecting evidence for months, trying to find someone at headquarters who would listen. She held up a flash drive. It's all in here. Teresa stared at her speechless. So, Zoe continued, are you from corporate or not? Something like that, Teresa replied. And yes, I very much want to see what's on that drive. Zoe smiled. Follow me. There's a computer in the HR office we can use. Vanessa's gone for the day. As they walked, Teresa asked, why are you doing this? You're risking your job. My mom was a housekeeper here for 10 years before she got sick. Horizon's health insurance saved her life. But under Phillips and Reynolds, they've cut those benefits. The next person won't be so lucky. She paused. Plus, I believe in this company, or at least what it used to stand for. Someone needs to fix it. In the HR office, Zoe plugged in the flash drive. What Teresa saw shocked her, even after everything she'd already discovered. Doctored financial reports, emails between Phillips and Reynolds discussing creative accounting, a secret agreement with Brightstar's CEO promising positions for both men after the sale went through, and most damning of all, the true financial statements showing the hotel was actually performing well. The decline in guest satisfaction was engineered to justify the sale. This is exactly what I needed, Teresa said, copying the files to her own phone. As the files transferred, the office door swung open. Philip stood there, eyes widening as he took in the scene. What the hell is going on here? He demanded. Zoe froze. Teresa stepped in front of her protectively. Mr. Phillips, she said, straightening to her full height and letting her natural voice return. I think it's time we had a conversation about the future of this hotel. His eyes narrowed, confusion giving way to dawning recognition and then alarm. Ms. Bennett? In the flesh, she smiled coldly. Surprise! The color drained from Philip's face as he stared at Teresa. His mouth opened and closed several times before he finally found his voice. This is completely inappropriate, he stammered. You can't just sneak around spying on your own employees. Interesting, Teresa replied, leaning against the desk. You're more concerned about my methods than the fact that you've been sabotaging my hotel and planning to sell it behind my back. Zoe's eyes widened. Wait, you're the Teresa Bennett? The CEO? Teresa nodded without taking her eyes off Phillips. I am. And Mr. Phillips here was just about to explain why he's been working with Lawrence Reynolds to deliberately run this hotel into the ground so they could sell it to Brightstar at a fraction of its value. Phillips straightened his tie, visibly trying to regain his composure. That's a ridiculous accusation. We've been dealing with budget constraints, staffing issues. Save it, Teresa cut him off. I've seen the real numbers. I've seen the emails between you and Reynolds. I've seen the draft agreement with Brightstar that includes very generous positions for both of you after the sale. His face hardened. You have no proof. Actually, Zoe spoke up, she does. She pointed to the flash drive. Every email, every doctored report, every policy change designed to reduce costs and drive away guests. It's all there. Phillips lunged for the flash drive, but Teresa was quicker. She snatched it up and stepped back. You're fired, Greg, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. He laughed. Security reports to me. And you seem to be forgetting something important. Lawrence Reynolds and the Brightstar executives are arriving in 30 minutes for the final negotiation. By this time tomorrow, the board will have approved the sale. We'll see about that, Teresa said, pulling out her phone. David, it's time. Bring the legal team. Phillips's smug expression faltered. What legal team? The one that's been on standby since I texted David this morning, Teresa replied. They're very interested in these files, especially the parts where you and Reynolds discussed how to manipulate financial reports. I believe the term fraud applies. As if on cue, her phone buzzed with a text from David. In lobby with lawyers and 2 board members. Where are you? Tell security to meet me in the presidential suite in 20 minutes, Teresa told Zoe. And find Rita. I want her there too. Zoe nodded and hurried out. Phillips moved to block the door. You're making a mistake, he said, his voice low and threatening. Reynolds has 3 board members in his pocket. You can't stop this. Watch me, Teresa replied, meeting his gaze steadily. Now either step aside or I'll have you removed for trespassing in my hotel. For a moment she thought he might refuse. Then, shoulders slumping, he moved aside. This isn't over, he muttered. For you, it absolutely is, Teresa countered, walking past him. In the lobby, she found David with 2 of her most trusted board members and the company's legal counsel. David did a double-take at her appearance before breaking into a wide grin. The disguise worked, he said as she approached. I walked right past you yesterday and had no idea. Too well, apparently, she replied, running a hand through her dyed hair. Phillips didn't recognize me until 5 minutes ago. She quickly briefed the group on everything she'd discovered. The lawyers looked increasingly grim as she laid out the evidence of fraud and conspiracy. This is serious criminal activity, the head lawyer said. We need to contact the authorities. And we will, Teresa assured him. But first, I want to confront Reynolds and these Brightstar people. I want to see their faces when they realize their plan has failed. One of the board members, Eleanor Wu, nodded approvingly.
Always did like your style, Teresa. What about the staff?
David asked. The ones who've been mistreated? They're my top priority, Teresa said firmly, after we deal with Reynolds. As they headed toward the elevators, Teresa spotted Rita watching from across the lobby, confusion evident on her face. She motioned for the housekeeper to join them. Rita, there's something I need to tell you, she said as they rode up to the presidential suite. You're not really Tess, are you? Rita said, surprising her. I had my suspicions. You were too interested in how things worked, asked too many questions, and you made the beds like someone who'd written a manual on it. Teresa smiled. Because I did write that manual. I'm Teresa Bennett, CEO of Horizon Hospitality. Rita's eyes widened. All this time, why would you do this? Because customer satisfaction scores were dropping, and no one could tell me why. Now I know it was deliberate. Phillips and Reynolds have been cutting corners, overworking staff, and providing inferior service to drive down the hotel's value so they could sell it. Rita shook her head, anger flashing in her eyes. We all knew something was wrong, but we never imagined. I'm going to fix it, Teresa promised. Starting today. But first, I need your help. They arrived at the presidential suite to find security already stationed outside. Inside, they quickly rearranged the furniture to create a more formal setting. With Teresa seated at the head of the table, flanked by the board members and legal team. Places, everyone, Teresa said as the appointed time approached. Rita, Zoe, I want you both to stay. You deserve to see this. At precisely 3 o'clock, a knock came at the door. David opened it to reveal Lawrence Reynolds looking confident in an expensive suit. Behind him stood 3 people in equally expensive attire, the Bright Star executives. Reynolds froze when he saw who was waiting for him. "Teresa, what are you doing here?" "Hello, Lawrence. Please come in. We were just discussing the future of the Miami hotel." Reynolds entered cautiously, his guests looking confused behind him. "I don't understand," said one of them, a bald man with a permanent frown. "Mr. Reynolds assured us this meeting was authorized by Horizon's CEO." "I am Horizon's CEO," Teresa replied, "and this meeting certainly wasn't authorized by me." "There's been a misunderstanding," Reynolds said smoothly. "Teresa, if we could speak privately." "There's no misunderstanding," Teresa cut him off. "You and Phillips have been deliberately sabotaging this hotel to justify selling it to Bright Star at a loss. You've overworked staff, cut corners on service, and violated numerous company policies and labor laws in the process." She turned to the Bright Star executives. "And you were happy to participate knowing the deal was fraudulent." The bald executive sputtered. "We were told this was a legitimate sale." "Reynolds assured us." "Reynolds lied," Teresa said flatly. "And we have all the evidence we need to prove it. Now you have 2 choices. You can leave quietly and never approach my company about an acquisition again, or you can stay and explain to the FBI why you were attempting to purchase a property through fraud and conspiracy." The Bright Star team looked at each other in alarm before quickly heading for the door. Reynolds moved to follow, but security blocked his path. "Not you, Lawrence," Teresa said. "You and I have some things to discuss, like the termination of your employment and the criminal charges you'll be facing." As Reynolds was escorted out, the room fell silent. Rita approached Teresa hesitantly. "What happens now?" she asked. "To us, I mean." "The staff," Teresa smiled warmly. "Now we fix what's broken. Starting with this." She pulled out a notepad. "I've been keeping a list of everything that needs to change. Better staffing levels, restored benefits, proper supplies, and fair treatment are just the beginning." "The staff won't believe it," Rita said, shaking her head in wonder. "They've lost so much hope." "Then let's give it back to them," Teresa replied. She turned to David. "Call an all-staff meeting in the ballroom in 1 hour. I want everyone there. Housekeeping, maintenance, front desk, kitchen, everyone." As the others filed out to make preparations, Zoe lingered behind. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "You could have sent auditors, investigators. Why go undercover yourself?" Teresa looked thoughtful. "When I started Horizon 15 years ago, I made a promise that I would never forget what it's like to be on the front lines. That I would never become one of those executives who only sees numbers on a spreadsheet instead of the people behind them." She smiled ruefully. "Somewhere along the way I started breaking that promise. I needed this, to remember what really matters in this company." An hour later, Teresa stood on a small stage in the hotel's grand ballroom, facing nearly 200 confused and wary employees. Many whispered and pointed when they recognized her as Tess the housekeeper. She was still in her housekeeping uniform, though she'd washed off the makeup that had made her look plain and tired. "Good afternoon," she began. "For those who don't know me, I'm Teresa Bennett, CEO of Horizon Hospitality. For the past 2 days, I've been working here undercover as a housekeeper named Tess Baker." A ripple of astonishment went through the crowd. "I came here because I knew something was wrong, but I needed to see it for myself. What I found was worse than I imagined. You've been overworked, underpaid, and treated with disrespect by management that was actively working against this hotel's success." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces, some hopeful, others skeptical. "That ends today." A tense silence filled the ballroom as Teresa stood before her employees. She could feel their doubt, their wariness. These people had been lied to and mistreated for months. Why should they believe things would change now? "I owe all of you an apology," she continued. "While I was focused elsewhere, people I trusted used that opportunity to damage what we built together. They cut your benefits, doubled your workloads, and treated you with disrespect, all to line their own pockets." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Teresa held up her hand. "But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that I didn't see it happening. I lost touch with the day-to-day reality of this hotel, of your working conditions. For that I am truly sorry." In the front row, Rita gave her an encouraging nod. "So what happens now?" Someone called from the back. "Now we fix it," Teresa replied firmly. Starting today, we're implementing emergency measures to address the most pressing issues. She gestured to David, who stepped forward with a stack of documents. First, Phillips and Reynolds have been removed. They will no longer be part of Horizon Hospitality. The board has already approved emergency funding to restore proper staffing levels, which means reasonable workloads and no more mandatory overtime without pay. A cautious ripple of hope moved through the room. Second, all benefit cuts from the past 8 months are immediately reversed. Those of you who lost health coverage will have it reinstated, retroactive to when it was cut. This announcement brought actual applause, and Teresa saw tears in the eyes of several staff members. Third, we're implementing a temporary 20% pay increase for all hourly employees while we conduct a complete wage review. No one at Horizon should be struggling to make ends meet while working full-time. The applause grew louder. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, we're creating a staff advisory council with representatives from every department. This council will meet with me personally each month to address concerns before they become problems. Because I promise you this, I will never lose touch with what's happening in my hotels again. As she finished speaking, the room erupted in cheers. Staff members hugged each other, some wiping away tears. The atmosphere transformed from tense disbelief to cautious celebration. Teresa stepped down from the stage and immediately found herself surrounded by employees wanting to share their experiences, their hardships, and their ideas for improvement. She listened to each one, taking notes, asking questions, treating every concern with the seriousness it deserved. After nearly 2 hours, David gently reminded her of the time. "The press will be here in an hour," he said quietly. "You might want to change out of the housekeeping uniform before you announce the leadership changes." Teresa looked down at her rumpled uniform and laughed. "Actually, I think I'll keep it on for the press conference. It makes a point, don't you think?" David grinned. Always did have a flair for the dramatic. As the ballroom cleared, Rita approached with a small group of housekeepers. "We wanted to thank you," she said. "Not just for the changes, but for actually doing the work alongside us. Most bosses wouldn't get their hands dirty." Teresa smiled. "Honestly, Rita, these past 2 days have been the best education I've had in years. I'd forgotten how hard this job is, how much skill and patience it takes. You've taught me more than you know." "Well," Rita said with a hint of mischief, "if you ever want a refresher course, housekeeping can always use an extra pair of hands." "I might take you up on that," Teresa replied, surprising herself by meaning it. Over the next week, Teresa postponed her return to corporate headquarters, choosing instead to oversee the transition at the Miami hotel personally. She appointed Zoe as interim hotel manager, a bold move that raised eyebrows among some executives, but Teresa was firm. She had the integrity and courage to document the problems when everyone else was looking the other way. She told the board, "That's exactly the kind of leadership we need." 7 days after her dramatic revelation, Teresa sat in what had once been Phillips's office, reviewing the changes already implemented. Staffing levels were back to company standards. Supply orders had been restored to proper quality. The maintenance backlog was being addressed. Most importantly, employee morale was rising daily. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was David with the latest customer satisfaction reports. "These can't be right," she said, scanning the numbers. "We're up 5 points already? That's impossible in just 1 week." "Apparently not," David replied, dropping into the chair across from her. "Turns out when staff aren't exhausted and demoralized, they provide better service." "Who knew?" Teresa laughed. "Okay, fair point." "The press is eating it up too," David continued. "The undercover boss who saved her hotel from corporate sabotage. It's a great story." "Speaking of stories," Teresa said, "how are our former colleagues doing?" David's expression hardened. "Phillips is cooperating with investigators, trying to save himself by throwing Reynolds under the bus. Reynolds is facing serious charges, fraud, conspiracy, possibly even embezzlement. The Bright Star executives are claiming ignorance, but the authorities aren't buying it. And the board members who were in Reynolds' pocket resigned this morning, effective immediately. Your little undercover adventure scared them straight." Teresa nodded, satisfied. "Good. Now we can focus on making sure this never happens again." "How do you plan to do that?" David asked. "You can't personally inspect every hotel in the chain." She smiled. "Actually, that's exactly what I'm going to do, but not as the CEO. I'm implementing a new company-wide policy. Every quarter, I'll work for 3 days as a regular employee in a different Horizon property. No one except the head of security at each location will know who I am. David raised his eyebrows. That's unconventional. So am I, Teresa replied with a shrug. And I'm done with conventional corporate leadership that puts distance between decision makers and the people affected by those decisions. This experience has taught me that you can't truly understand what's happening in your company unless you're willing to step into your employees' shoes. 3 months later, Teresa returned to the Miami hotel for the grand reopening celebration. The property had undergone a rapid but thorough renovation, restoring it to its former glory. More importantly, it was now the highest-rated hotel in the Horizon chain for both guest satisfaction and employee morale. As she walked through the gleaming lobby, several staff members greeted her by name, not with the nervous deference she'd once received as CEO, but with genuine warmth and respect. Rita, now head of housekeeping with a substantial raise, gave her a tour of the improvements. We've implemented that training program you suggested, she said proudly. New hires now get a full week of paid training before starting solo work. Turnover is down 60% already. And how's Zoe doing as manager? Teresa asked. Rita grinned. She's tough but fair. Runs a tight ship but never asks anyone to do something she wouldn't do herself. Sound like someone else I know? In the grand ballroom, now decorated for the celebration, Teresa found herself surrounded by the same employees who had once looked at her with suspicion. Now they shared jokes, updates on their families, and ideas for further improvements. The atmosphere was transformed. As the evening wound down, Teresa stepped out onto the hotel's beachfront terrace. The Miami sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, reflecting off the ocean waves. She took a deep breath of the salt air and smiled to herself. Zoe joined her, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. Penny for your thoughts, boss? I was just thinking about how differently this all could have ended, Teresa replied, accepting the glass. If I hadn't decided to see things for myself, we might have lost this place. Not just the property, but the people, the spirit of what makes Horizon special. Sometimes you have to get your hands dirty to truly understand the work, Zoe said. That's what my mom always told me about housekeeping. Turns out it applies to running companies too. Teresa nodded. The view sure is different from the ground floor than from the executive suite. Speaking of which, Zoe said with a mischievous smile, rumor has it you'll be visiting our Chicago location next month. As a bellhop? Teresa laughed. News travels fast. Yes, that's the plan. I figure I should learn every job in the hotel eventually. The other executives think you're crazy, you know. Probably, Teresa agreed, but our numbers don't lie. Every hotel where I've implemented these changes has seen double-digit improvements in both guest and employee satisfaction. From inside, they could hear the sounds of celebration continuing, laughter, music, the hum of happy conversations. In business school, they taught me that a company is defined by its balance sheet, Teresa said quietly. But they were wrong. A company is defined by its people, how they treat each other, how they treat customers, how they feel about coming to work each day. Zoe raised her glass, to seeing things from a different perspective, and to never forgetting where we came from, Teresa added, clinking her glass against Zoe's. As they turned to rejoin the party, Teresa took one last look at the hotel, her hotel standing tall against the darkening sky. The past few months had taught her that leadership wasn't about corner offices or executive decisions made from afar. Real leadership meant rolling up your sleeves, doing the work alongside your team, and never losing sight of the human impact of every decision. Sometimes, she reflected, you had to step out of the spotlight to truly see the whole picture, and sometimes the most valuable lessons came when you were the one taking orders instead of giving them.